I believe it was in this building at 7010 Kennedy Avenue that for a few years another hobby model shop existed. I don't know what the name of it was, and I only recall being in it twice. I'll tell you about those 2 times. The second time was in 1963, very early, January of 63. It was report card time, and somehow I managed to get $1 out of my parents because my report card was good enough, so they slipped me $1. At any rate, this store was in this space, I believe, and it was very bare. It was very austere. There was like nothing all over here, as I recall, but over on this end, on the south end, there was a counter, a glass counter with some stuff in the glass case, and on the back wall, on the pegboard shelves, there were models, lots of them. And in January of 63, I was after the Aurora Viking ship model. And my best friend Charlie Harvey and I had agreed, we had a little contest going, that whoever could get $1 out of their parents first would come down here and get that Viking ship model which was up on the wall in the left-hand corner. Well, I got the $1, and I remember Charlie and he was gracious enough to walk me down here, fighting in the snow in my alley right behind my house where we were rolling around because he was feigning that he was very upset with me. Well, I came here and got the Viking ship model. I painted it, slapped it together, I think that very night. It actually lasted about 20 years and met its doom, I think about in 1983, when another friend of mine, Scott Kingery, and I decided, we were doing some dress-up Viking pictures like we used to do. We decided to take the Viking ship and destroy it. And so what we did was to put it in a wheelbarrow filled with water in his backyard and put some very lame, chintzy little backdrop, painted backdrop. And we used a big magnifying glass to photograph the thing as we burned it. We torched it. It was like the big immolation scene of the Viking ship. And it looked really bad. Maybe we'll see some of those pictures later. The other time I was in this building was in the summer of 1960. I was taking my dad on one of my wild chases looking for, I believe it was the dinosaur models manufactured by Pyro Plastics, the Tyrannosaurus, Stegosaurus, Brontosaurus. I just suddenly got possessed, and my dad says, all right, we'll see if we can find them for you. We lived in Woodmar at the time, so we had no idea what this building was. We stopped in, and there was a gentleman. They didn't have the dinosaur models. There was a gentleman, middle-aged guy, and he was Scottish. And I remember he was wearing a white shirt, a dress white shirt, which was kind of rolled up to the elbows. And we asked him, he said, no dinosaurs. He said, have you tried Pee-wee's store down in Highland? We had no idea what he was talking about. And we said, no, how do we get there? And he says, well, you go down this street. And he says, you come to an intersection. And he says, on one corner, there's a drugstore. And across from that is a gas station. And across from that is a tavern. And across from that is a furniture store. And so we said, great. So my dad and I hopped in the car, started driving south on Kennedy Avenue that day in June of 1960. And my dad says, that was very charming. He says, I think he was Scottish. Did you hear the way he said furniture store? And we began our trek looking for Pee-wee's store in Highland, Indiana. That corner that the Scottish gentleman told my father and I about was here, the corner of Highway Avenue and Kennedy Avenue in Highland, Indiana. And the drugstore was the famous Ken Ridge drugstore. The gas station is there. The tavern is no longer there, as you can see. And the furniture store was part of the Highland department store, well known to everyone here. Here on Highway Avenue, I believe the Ben Franklin store, the Five and Dime store, which was a national chain, was here. But right about here, I believe it was, in a little storefront, was a tiny mom-and-pop toy store, one of the most unique of them all. It was called Pee-wee's. And it was a very, very small storefront. I only recall being in it a couple of times. We went here in search of the Pyro dinosaurs that day and didn't find them, as I recall. But I do remember Pee-wee's in another very special occasion to me. It was a few years later. In fact, it was in November of 1962. And this is the saga of the Aurora Gold Knight model, that elusive Aurora Gold Knight, the one that was mounted on the horse. Well, at any rate, earlier in that year, in June of '62, when I graduated from 5th grade, got the good report card, the whole deal, so my dad took us out for a little reward. We went to Shoppers World, which was in Highland on Indianapolis Boulevard. More on that at another time. Shoppers World was the big store then here in Highland. And there we found these excellent Civil War muskets. This was right at the height of the Civil War centennial. My brother and I were nuts about it. These were great Civil War muskets with wood stocks and the ramrod and the little cork balls and a trigger mechanism. It was fabulous. But one aisle over, there was a pile, 2 piles of the Aurora Gold Knight model. Nobody had seen this model available for about 5 years, and here it was. Well, at any rate, it was a real dilemma for me. My father said, I'm not going to buy you both of them. You got to choose the musket or the Gold Knight model. Interestingly enough, both of them sold for the exact same price, $2.22. It was $2.22. I chose the musket. Okay, my brother and I each got a Civil War musket. About 6 weeks later, that would be in July of '62, I had I was taking swimming lessons at Hessville Pool. I had a terrible sinus reaction to the chlorine, and I was really laid up for it. It was a terrible thing. And I went to the doctor, and my doctor at that time was none other than Virgil Angel, who was a doctor here in Highland, 1 block over on Jewett Street. Some of you may remember his life came to a violent and tragic end. I believe it was in 1995. Anyway, this all ties together. Anyway, my dad came home, felt so bad for me. He says, I'll run out and get you something because you've been ill all day. What would you like? And I said, the Gold Knight model. Please get it for me. He went to Shoppers World. He came back and said, they're all gone. I was crestfallen. Jump to that November 16th, a Friday night. Report cards came out. Yeah, mine was good enough. It was just marginal. And I said, all right, we'll take you to get you something. I wanted that Gold Knight model and had to find it. On that night, we arrived here at Pee Wee's store about 8:45. The store was just about to close, as I recall. We walked in. It was a very, very dark little store. One of those real magical feels to it. I don't know what in the world they had in the back in the shelves. We never went back there. But the counter was right up here in the corner, and the glow from the fluorescent light, the neon light that said Pee Wee's in the window, kind of purplish, and the guy was there and he said, we're going to close soon. He said, Gold Knight? No, I don't think I have that. I had it at one point, but you can look. Well, the models were right next to the counter, built into the wall. The shelves were built into the walls, and I started looking, and I saw the Blue Knight model, the Aurora Blue Knight, the side panel. That wasn't it. So my heart really started to sink as I went down the shelves. And there it was, though. I couldn't believe it. In the big, thick box, 1 copy of the Gold Knight model. I was so thrilled that my quest, for this model was finally fulfilled, and my prayers were answered here in Pee Wee's Toy Store. Took the model home, slapped it together the next day, painted it. I still have the original of it. And with the paint job that I did the very next day on Saturday, November 17th, '62. Another childhood story, another quest finally fulfilled thanks to Pee Wee's Toy Store.